Hey everyone, welcome to the Funky Marketing Podcast. Today is another episode when we talk about specific things, specific strategies that can help you grow your B2B company. And today we're going to talk about the power of B2B brand building. Today, my guest is Stef Hamerlink, a brand strategist, designer living in Belgium. We was just joking about Belgium and Serbia and basketball. And Stef, welcome to the show.
Hey man, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I feel like, looking at your background and everything, it really reminds me a lot of those design podcasts. I consume a lot of stuff, so I watch a lot of stuff, and it's, like you've been guest on Chris Doe show, right?
Right, right.
So it reminds me a lot on those things. I mean, that actually should be the vibe of the podcast, right? When the person is in main focus, and there are some books around it. Like I'm still building my studio, so it's kind of in
Actually, it
construction.
looks quite similar.
Yeah. I mean, there's a printer here, but it doesn't matter.
It shows that you do real work.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me and tell the guys a little bit about your background. I know you started in design and then you kind of switched to brand strategy, right?
Right. How much time do we have? No. I'll keep it short. But basically started out as a designer like at my own little studio I had with my brother, and that grew throughout the years to like let's say at a certain point 10 people. And in that time, I went from being like a bit of an all around designer, motion designer, graphic design. I also loved 3D. I loved a lot of stuff. I did a lot of different stuff to become more focused on brand design specifically. And then once I started to be passionate about that, I wanted to learn more about the entrepreneurs behind the brands. I wanted to understand the story, the business goals, so I started doing these kind of workshops, story sessions I call them. And then I wanted to basically understand more about this whole idea of what brand strategy is, so I started reading a lot, learned about Chris Doe and the Future, and then got further and deeper into marketing science and got really interested into how you actually build brands besides the design aspect of it. And so really grew into this whole world of brand building, which you referred to earlier, and then basically started applying that for clients, started working on that with clients, starting to gain real experience in actually doing that, both in my own studio and then also, for example, now I'm working almost full time for Allen, which is a health tech brand, very interesting brand, where I'm basically building their brand together. So I wanted to try that as well, to be in-house for a few years, and that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm still also running my own stuff, podcast and some courses, and yeah, busy bee.
Yeah, man. And I love that you went in-house, for a while to deal with that and kind of get the feeling of how it's like working on those stuff. I always feel like working with people who are like entrepreneurs or solopreneurs for whole of their careers, like they're missing one bit of the whole big picture.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that like it was one of those bucket list things that I wanted to do, but I needed like really the right brand, the right opportunity to do it. And Allen was one of those brands that was like super fascinating in terms of where they are in growth, and they really want to build a brand. And so I found that mission very interesting. But the way I see it is I'm still like an entrepreneur even within that company. Like the way I build it and the way I work on it, it's like it's not that I'm just there to be like an employee. I feel like it's really this mission we're doing together, and then hopefully I can apply those things to other customers and maybe also teach it to some of my audience as well. So it's a super interesting thing to do, and I think everybody at one point should actually be involved in building a brand long term, because there's a huge difference in like what I did before was brand strategy for clients in a branding agency. So basically they come to you, you sit together, you do this process, you go through it 2 3 months, you develop their brand, you basically craft their identity, you position them, etc., etc. and then they're off to the races, and you're not involved in actually making that brand like a reality, growing it, marketing it. And that's where I think a lot of people still are lacking some really interesting experience, because that's where it becomes real.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, you've chosen a hard industry to go into.
Well, you could say hard, or you could say it is quite a boring industry in the sense that a lot of tradition.
Challenging, maybe, right?
Voila, voila. But it is very, it's complex. It's not easy. It's not like you're selling beer or anything. There's a lot of layers in B2B anyway, because you have a lot of different decision makers and segments, and then you have this space specifically, which I mean is health tech and insurance, which is like very complex. But on the other hand, it's a great opportunity to do something in that space that feels different, that feels distinct from what other brands are doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, looking up on internet about the topic of B2B brand building, I was looking out to see, what are people writing about. And the first article that I found out is from like this June, says the forgotten power of B2B brand building. And it kind of paints the perfect picture of how it is, right?
Hmm.
Back in the past, companies used to care about branding, about these things, but somehow we moved to, in B2B, caring only about themselves and extracting what they need from the customers. And now
Hmm.
I think slowly it's catching up from B2C, and we see that it's not just a building like a factory. It's the group of people inside the company that you need to create a relationship with to be able to sell to them based on the jobs that they need to do inside it. So there's a human aspect, but there's also a more complex aspect when you have, what do they do as a company and as executives on certain positions, and it complicates things. But on the other hand, we are getting more and more information that when it's the time for the company to buy, basically they already have a list and they always choose somebody from that list, even if they do the research
Yeah,
before. and
totally.
and that's basically ending up being on top of mind before the time comes for them to buy.
Exactly. And in that sense, there's not a lot of difference with how B2B and B2C works, in the sense that you're working with human beings and we have brains, and in these brains there are certain processes that have been found by science, like the whole system 1, system 2 thinking, all of the biases we have, like familiarity bias and all these things, where basically when we are exposed to a brand couple of times, we will trust it more. So when we have seen it even years before we go into the market or have that specific need, we're exposed to it, we trust it more, we're gonna buy more easily. So that type of thing is like, we don't typically think of that as much as we do in B2C, because in B2C it's like impulse buying. So we really know that when somebody walks in the aisle, it needs to pop off, needs to have that link. But actually there's not a lot of difference in how it works in B2B, and we see that in our data. Like, for example, people that come in knowing the brand convert a lot easier, like you could say maybe 10x or whatever, depending on the context. But basically they convert a lot easier because they already know, trust the brand somewhat, it feels familiar, they have maybe an emotional connection to it. But it's that type of thinking I think we need more in B2B. On the other hand, B2B is a different beast, and you can't just simplify it in the matter of saying, oh, we just need a campaign for everyone, put it on TV, and then we'll get bought. That's not the case. There's a lot more complexity in the journey, but still the basics, fundamentally how you build a brand, is not that different.
Listening to you, I'm thinking, you have a brand part in closing the demand, meaning going on Google, you're gonna go instantly to the category leader, right? Somebody
Yep.
who has a brand who's already there. But if you still don't know, you're not in a buying process, you're not on the market, you're going, for example, on LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever you go to kind of consume the content, then you also will remember somebody who pops up and who is repeatedly there. And I always think about, when I think about companies, you know, if they enter the door, what would they look like? What would be the feeling? You know, that kind of thing. Because
Mhm.
that's something that I inherit from B2C. And when I started Funky Marketing, I imagine it as, you know, Marvin Gaye singing in the NBA All-Star game, you know, abandoned by everybody. I don't know if you know that, but it was the first time ever that somebody sang the national anthem of the USA in a different manner. Basically, it was the music from Let's Getting On,
Oh wow.
and he was singing, right? And people didn't know what they would expect because he was abandoned from everybody, dealing with drugs, with depressions, with different things. He wasn't even the first choice. It was Lionel Richie, but they only knew one song, right? Hello,
Yeah.
is it me you're looking for, right? So, and he came and he just started to sing. People were first confused, what's going on? That's not the national anthem music. And then they started clapping, and the NBA players were confused. They said he stole the show. They said, I think Pat Riley says that it was the history, significance, and the hood all in one performance. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Okay, we are coming from Serbia. We know what we are doing, but you know, until you try it on, you won't see it. But when you try it on, this is what happens.
Love that. I
So you
didn't
kind
see that
of,
video, but I'm gonna look it up for sure.
yeah, I'll send it to you because they consistently, you know, delete the video, then it
Mm.
pops up on another, and you know it goes. But one thing that always I see somebody writes under the video is, this is the first time somebody make babies while listening to the national anthem.
That's Marvin Gaye for y'all.
Exactly. So tell me, when we start thinking about brand from the B2B company perspective, what are the first things that we should consider?
Good question. Obviously, there's I think two layers. There's like already there's fundamental principles to marketing that you need to understand. Knowing those are already a good start. Like for example, one of those I think there's two rules that I love talking about is the 95-5 rule in terms of uh, I think it's LinkedIn who did this research. Basically, at any given point in any market, but specifically in B2B markets, this is the case. 95% of your future customers are not in market, meaning they don't need your product, service, whatever right now. They don't need it. They're not thinking about it. They're busy doing other stuff. 5% is in market, is giving off signals. So signals could be search queries, could be, with downloading your ebook, whatever it is. And those can be quite easily targeted and trying to convert them because they have a need and you can basically work on that need, and that need is visible in some way or trackable. So understanding that 95% is a big group that you cannot ignore because it's your future cash flow, it's the people that will become in market at some point, is crucial. And the thing is, there already is that you need to let go of only targeting people that you know are going to buy. At a certain point, at a certain scale, you need to do that, otherwise you won't be able to have a brand be familiar when they come in market. So that's already an important one. And the other 95-5 rule is actually, it's the same thing. It's 95% of our decisions are being made unconsciously, basically meaning when we like what you said earlier, when B2B buyers make a decision unconsciously, they've already shortened that list to maybe two or three brands based on those unconscious moments that happened before that, where basically you influence them with how, like, feelings, familiarity, being distinctive, being recognizable, having your codes, all of that very essential stuff, basically how you look like and making sure that you pop off, is already like 101. But most companies don't do both of those rules very well. So already, if you're rocking those fundamentals, I think you're already in a good spot. But then of course there is all the specific context you need to gather around your company, your market, your customer. So trying to understand how they feel, how they think, how what are their frustrations with the current category, how do they look at the category, how do they look up at competitors, but also understanding incumbents, like how are they moving, what is the space in general doing, are they all moving towards this new I don't know, whatever trend that is happening, trying to understand those incumbents, trying to understand the market share they have, trying to understand the efforts that they already did in terms of marketing. And then the like that's the three C's model, which I think is very good when you're starting out working on brand strategy for any company, is basically trying to understand the consumer, trying to understand the category, so the competitors, and then trying to understand the company. And within the company, you need to understand what is the DNA, what is the history, what are the business goals, all of those things. And putting those three C's together will give you a good idea of, okay, how do we need to position ourselves, and then how will that translate into messaging, into visual style, and so on. And then again, keeping those base layers in mind that we talked before about the 95/5 rule and about impacting those unconscious brains. I think that's, in a nutshell, I'd say like one of the key things to do.
Yes, finally somebody said those things on the show besides me. So thanks for doing that. There are a lot of things to unpack. One thing I think not many companies realize is that they need to change their whole business models if they're gonna adjust to those 95/5 stats and basically go from there. But that's for another topic we're gonna get into. But tell me, when we already know that, so basically the internet has matured and we spend more time on social than we spend actually doing our job. We spend more time in small communities. Yeah, I remember like 2 years ago when I was a director in the agency and the owner walking by and a guy who's a copywriter, was chatting on LinkedIn. He was like, damn, he should actually do something, right? We used to say that. Now it turned off completely in a couple of years. But also who we know and who we trust, based on in those communities we have like 10 people that we trust. We have like somebody on speed dial, like 3 to 5 people that we trust, that we can ask about that person, that company, that product. Basically our job, if we want to sell in B2B, is to that our name or name of the product or the name of the company pops up into those conversations,
Mhm.
right? So to be able to get that, we need to find a way how to differentiate. And in today's B2B space, especially if you talk about B2B SaaS, like there are millions of companies and all of them have the same technology. All of them have the same people working with the same technology, building similar products.
Mhm.
So what's your stand on how do we actually differentiate ourselves? The starting point is the thing that you said, right? Getting to know the category, getting to know us, and getting to know the customers.
Mm. Well, I mean, first off, I would question the notion whether we really need to differentiate, in the sense that I think a lot of companies can be successful without being very differentiated, just by sheer share of voice, by being louder and more present than other companies. I think that's fine. That's, have a look that's recognizable and then be as loud as you can. That's a great strategy. I don't think there's a problem in there. The problem is that costs you a lot of money, to get there, to get to that share of voice, whatever the category is. You need to spend a lot of money to get close to those leaders who can do that. So basically, when you are a very like young company, differentiation is an interesting strategy, because you can build something else, or you can do it in a different way, or like anything in terms of business model or product development. I think it is crucial. I think there is no differentiation without actually having something that is really different in your product. I think that's where a lot of branding professionals do get a bit confused, where like they do a very differentiated brand, but on below that surface there isn't anything that is really differentiated. I don't think that's very smart, because basically you're building expectations that are not met. So I would encourage anyone like working in brand strategy to go upstream first and talk about, is the product or is the service really differentiated enough to actually come out with this differentiated messaging. And then if that is the case, because for example, at Allen, I think we really have a product that is different in a couple of ways. And we see a lot of incumbents coming in the market and offering similar stuff, but it's nowhere near the same quality. But then the question is, of course, how do you talk about that and how do you make that clear? And that's not as easy because, again, if we go back to that original point of like 95% of our decisions are unconscious, it means that you cannot go in rational selling mode straight away. Doesn't And differentiation is basically saying to people, we are different because we offer something better. But to make that point, you already have to be in selling mode, which is not the first thing you do. The first thing you do is say, "Hey, I'm here. I have something interesting to say. Maybe I can help you, and I look a little bit different, and maybe that's enough." So again, like building on those fundamentals, I think it's more important first to connect on an emotional level with those prospects, and then like throughout your sales funnel, go in and talk about differentiation. If you are that, yes, go ahead, please prove as hard as you can at the moment that you are having those real discussions, those conversations, that you are really something else. And of course, that should already shine through in all of your messaging in a way, but it shouldn't be the core point that you need to make always, like, hey, we're different, hey, we're different. I would rather make the point like, hey, we're here, and and that's already enough. So yeah, long winding take. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes the perfect sense. I mean, you need to get to know your audience to find out those answers, right? Do you need to differentiate in a different way? Do you maybe just need to raise your voice and to be seen more? And it all depends also on the, on how big of the market is, right?
Exactly.
From a step, I always say, in your go-to-market strategy, you need to focus on actually getting at least 30% of the market that's mostly winning, in 18 months. If you can do that, that's the good starting point. From then,
18 or 80?
18.
Okay. Wow. That's a that's
Yeah,
a that's a quite a steep trajectory depending on the market, but
I say that because I always say you should go as narrow as possible on
mm,
defining your primary audience,
okay.
meaning them, and then you expand.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that. If you look at it like from a ICP ID of, like, your ideal customer profile, and you really target those in your initial go-to market, I agree that there's a lot of potential there. But then that's the interesting part, is moving from that initial scrappy startup mindset of reaching those people that are just 100% fit for you and you'll be able to sell to easily, shifting to a broader reach, reaching those 95% that are out of market, is a really, really interesting transition, requires a different mindset, requires different people. And it's something like I've been really fascinated by, because basically I'm experiencing as I go along that shift. I think it's something a lot of companies struggle with.
Definitely, and shift and changes are the things that breaks a lot of companies. Yesterday I was talking with a couple of people, how easily it looks like when you say, I'm going to go up market, or I'm going to shift, from small businesses to selling to the mid-sized businesses.
Mm.
Is actually a totally different thing and a different beast to deal with.
Entirely, and it requires different tactics. That's an interesting one, where like, for example, indeed, like working towards those larger companies, trying to target those, like what we've done is like really super high end exclusive dinners, those types of things, which is totally different than say a YouTube pre-roll ad campaign. So you really, that's where, like, I think execution really makes the difference in how impactful it will be. And you can have the best strategy ever, the best research ever, totally understand your market, and still everything can fall flat in like how you actually reach those segments at the right moment, on the right channel. And that is like, I think the biggest challenge of all is like executing well on it, understanding how to measure that impact, amplifying it, scaling it. I mean, those are like the real challenges. Well, I mean, obviously the strategy is as well, but you can have a quite a bad strategy built on very bad assumptions and still knock it out of the park, but you can't do like an amazing strategy with bad execution. You'll never land there.
Yeah, I always say marketing is as good as fast as it can ship things, right? Because you can stay and just talk about things for a year,
Oh well.
and don't ship anything, and nothing will happen, right? So from that standpoint, like it takes a time to build a brand. The most common thing that people say is like around 2 years, but that's actually fast.
That's
If
really fast.
we,
That's
yeah,
really fast. It depends. I mean, there are players that I think can build a brand and again, like it depends indeed in what niche and like how small, how big the scale is. I think you can do it in 2 years, but then it's really about like shifting at quite quickly to that, bigger marketing machine. And as you said, like I think it's a lot of small things, multiplication of all of those small things that really builds a brand. It's not like the one or two big bombs that you think that are gonna make the brand. Some brands get lucky and get, like a huge PR storm or go viral, but for the other 99% of brands, it's the day in, day out, like small communications, trying to reach more people, trying to do that efficiently on a budget. That's, I think, again, where really execution shines.
I have a question, and I'm interested to hearing your thoughts. Do you think there are some things that we can do to kind of make it look like that we already have a brand until we are building it? Right? Those can be like some smaller campaigns when we include people of authority in the space. That could be like maybe organizing a conference, an offline event, or something like that. So interesting to hearing your thoughts about it.
It's indeed like almost this idea of inflating yourself a bit, making you look bigger. And I think there is ways to do that. And I think some brand marketers are really genius at doing that. I can give some examples. Like I think one of the things that makes you look bigger is getting PR. It's like it's such a stupid thing, but being in front of like the top, how do you say it, newspapers or like TV, prime time news is like an instant way to people say, oh wow, this train is really going, I need to get on board, even if it's like not really that impactful in terms of brand awareness, because people usually haven't been exposed to your brand codes or your messaging very well in a press context. It's just the sheer fact of sharing that you were on that press, and some people being exposed to that, that's a really one where you establish yourself and build a lot of credibility. Another one is indeed events. If you can, like, because events can cost a lot of money, it's anything physical that isn't like, because in like in the digital world you can say, well, we put this post online, we put 200 euros in, and 100,000 people have seen it, which is obviously bullshit. But oh, sorry, I don't know if I can swear, but
Of course.
anyway, but you do an event and you have to have a physical venue, you have to have catering, you have to do it well. It's gonna cost you some real money. But if you think about it in terms of ROI, it's often so much more impactful for a person to be in a room exposed to your brand, your story, your people for 4 or 5 hours. Like the amount of impact you have versus like an impression somewhere on social media, it's just ridiculous. So you have to take that into consideration when you do these things. And there are ways to minimize the budget on that. For example, speakers can, if you're a big brand like Salesforce, you just go out and you pay Gwyneth Paltrow $1 million to be on stage, whatever. I mean, there's budget for it. But if you're small, you try to get one below Gwyneth Paltrow for free. Like, you can do that. There's ways to do that. There's personal connections you might have. There's maybe levers you can push. Try to get those like seemingly expensive profiles on a stage or on a webinar, and you're already like, that's what you said about authority, you're already lending that authority, and people feel like, wow, these guys are really onto something. Because it's this thing that Rory Sutherland told me on my podcast, which is like, he's a behavioral scientist, really interesting guy.
Yeah, we had Rolly on the podcast as well.
Voila. He talks a lot about costly signaling, which is basically this idea that as a brand to be trusted, things like billboard campaigns are basically just saying, hey, we have the money to be on TV or on a billboard. And hacking that is basically a way to say, well, we don't have the money, but it seems we have the money to do that. And people often think like, wow, this small brand is already here doing this stuff, they must be growing, they must be doing something right. So it's just a way to send signals to people that they're trustworthy. So events, if you can find some quick wins in terms of like speakers and venue, and just leverage whatever you have that nobody else can use, that will make it seem like you spend a shit ton of money, and of course make the experience as good as possible. Other things we do often that are also like really working well is like sending people gifts. It's a very traditional thing to do, but the things that are traditional now are actually feel quite distinct because everybody is just doing online stuff. So when you get something physical in the hands of people, it makes you a lot more memorable. Again, it costs more, but if you can do that in a way that, it doesn't cost you a fortune, and you can do it at a way that you can scale it, it's really good. And then another example, we had a campaign on like mental health with Alan, which was a very interesting. Like, we did a survey, national sample. We had a lot of interesting data. Also, a good way to get press. But then we also had this video where we basically had really interesting, influential people talk about this data, and all of those people in that video wanted to talk about it for free. But once they start sharing that stuff online, I mean, you're again lending credibility, you're lending audiences, you're going into new spaces. So those are the types of things where I think you can really shortcut some of these things and make it seem like you're bigger than you are, which is the right way, I think, to build trust over time.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about your design. I was looking at Alan's page and design. You literally envisioned a friend, right?
But well, of course, all credits go to all of the people. Like, there's a brand design team working at Allen. There's agencies worked on it in the past. I think my contribution was mostly to the mascot. Like, I think that was one of the codes that I worked on a lot to make it even more prominent, more like visceral, more part of the communication, more part of the campaigns. Because I believe this type of thing, like your as Jenny Romagnoc calls them, your distinctive brand assets or your brand codes, are essential tools in the marketing toolkit. And that's one of the things I think Alan is doing quite well. It's like, it's this really interesting, even just having that creature in a B2B space is like, already just the choice of it is enough to be different, because nobody in B2B insurance is like having this furry creature walking around. Like, they think, oh, like, why you won't be taken seriously, and that's the problem. It's this idea that we instantly need to be in rational selling mode all of the time, and we need to look like that as well. Look at Salesforce. They are probably the most trusted B2B brand in the world. I mean, I don't have the data to back it up, but I can imagine, I've seen some numbers on them. they have cute furry little mascots running around everywhere, like furry Einstein creatures, very, and that's a perfect way for them to, be recognizable as a brand. I'm not saying they're always using that in, let's say, corporate marketing settings or whatever, but most of the time it works well for their brand. And even actually, like when we give cute fluffy little bears, they're no they're not here anyway, but to people, like even the most super high level customers appreciate that stuff. It's like, oh wow, just a friendly, fun brand. Like, you don't need to take yourself that seriously. At a certain point, you do, when you talk about what's the real return on impact of our return on investment of our product. Then you can get down to very serious conversations. But all of it before, like, keep it a bit light. I mean, people have enough on their heads to take this all very seriously.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, you reminded me now when, we started distributing content from the podcast, and basically, it was the headline and transcript and everything started. Everybody started doing that, right? So we say we
Yeah.
got to do something differently, and we just added a small little change, which is old TV frame, and we were inside the old TV frame when we shared it on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and people were like, aha, okay, something's going on,
Voilà.
right? And it reminded me a lot of back in the days when Drift was the first company that actually took over LinkedIn as a company, right? They all
Mhm.
had like Drift t-shirts and whatnots, and they all looked the same. It was the first like non-formal look of the company. Before
Mhm.
that, it was okay, we are all the same, but we all have suits, we all have ties or whatever it is. And and going from that standpoint, I think it slowly started to change. Now we have like the company which is like named Lavender, with all the colors, with everything. We have a lot of different people inside that. But just want to say, there is one thing, for example, that we did in the first year to kind of make it look like we have a brand. It wasn't anything that much planned, but basically we were all around LinkedIn. We closed, I think, 67 deals in the first year. It was
Mhm.
three of us in the team, and we were nobody in top voices, whatever it is, the lists on LinkedIn. So we say we're going to create our own list. So I asked people from the company, can you name me like 20 people that you follow on LinkedIn that you trust? So we merge them all together and create a list of like 20 people of authority and just pronounce Funky Marketing Top Voices list. Right. We even had the branding, which like the golden microphone and those kind of things. I recorded the episodes with each one of them. Then
Mhm.
we have like the small interviews. And when we share that, it looked like a legit list. Right. I mean, it was a legit list, just we have chosen the
No,
people.
no, but it's a
And
great tactic.
yeah, basically they shared the things. We didn't even remember to have a hashtag, right? People started posting the hashtags inside their headlines, like Funky Marketing Top Voice, those kind of things. And
Mhm.
it was Gaetano Dinardi, it was Piplaya, it was a lot of great people on the list. And basically we got the content for the next 6 months by doing that.
Voila. And you
And
probably got those people to share that as well, the people that were on the list, which is like they have a shit ton of reach, which you don't have yet. And
exactly.
they're just giving it you to you because you gave them a stage and you said, like, and
Yeah,
there's not even anything like sneaky about it. It's like it's a good switch. Like, I mean, here I'm gonna put you on a pedestal, I'm gonna give you some credibility, and for in return you just like share it with your audience. And again, like, it's, I think that's even the basic concept of a podcast, like what you're doing and what I did as well. Like, it gave me a lot of, like, long term, a lot of benefits just talking to very interesting people, because they always share when it's like well done, professional, and it's just a great lever. So one of the few levers we have besides paying to get an audience, beside paid advertising.
exactly. I mean, and it's the faster way than advertising, right? Because you get directly to talk to the customers. You don't need to go through the advertising and then to reach them. And it's in a way cheaper, right? If you look at it from that perspective, advertising budget here, you need to invest
Mm,
in some other things, but still, going to somebody that is cold totally and inviting people in one-on-one relationship to kind of be a guest on the podcast and talk about themselves,
mm.
it's a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say like I think it really depends on the business goals. Like for me, for the
Definitely.
podcast, I know like I'm passionate about this thing. I can do it for 5 for 10 years. There's no pressure in terms of growth. I just want to keep building on it. If your company, like let's say Monday.com, like they've been aggressively advertising, I think for the last, I don't know, 3 4 5 years, I don't know, but like I've seen the ads, like I don't know if you've seen it, but like a million times. And I know they're pushing a lot on that lever, but I can imagine it's to do with like how there's like their stakeholders or investors are expecting growth, and there's not always the way to do. It's not always A or B. It's really depending on what your brand, your business strategy is, and how you want to grow, and then based on that you spend the money or you put in the time, because both are interesting ways to do it, and maybe there's a combination, but it really does depend, and there's no single path forward. But I think B2B creators is a really interesting strategy, and like a venue that a lot of brands are still ignoring.
Yeah, I think like the whole, how do we call them? Evangelist, influencers these days. I don't know, subject matter. It's not subject matter expert. It's more than that.
Mhm.
But basically, that's becoming also one of the important, let's say, tools that the B2B companies can use to kind of, extend their presence inside the market.
Exactly.
Two things for the end. First one is tell to the people where they can find more about you, listen to the episodes of your podcast that you've been recording, and also reach out to you to, maybe get into discuss more about the things or ask about some nuances.
All right. Well, you can find everything at letstalkbranding.substack.com. That's the spot where like the podcast is hosted. There's a YouTube channel where I also do a lot of stuff. I have an interesting documentary coming up. And then you can always find me on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever, but visit the Substack and you'll be easily redirected to all of that stuff.
Yeah, we'll link that into the description of the episode. Guys, it's the time when I always tell you to go back to the beginning of the podcast, subscribe, of course, if you didn't subscribe yet. And listen, we said a lot of things. Stop wherever you think that you need to stop, write down things, think about stuff, reach out to Stef, reach out to me if you need more explanation or you want to discuss about things. And for the end, Stef, tell me one thing, because I see you like drinking beer as I do. So what's your favorite beer?
Oh my god, it's a good question. Well, I'm
It
I'm
is.
I'm Belgium, so that's it's hard. I love a lot of beers. Let's say I think probably Omer, which is a Belgian beer. Omer is a amazing beer. I really love to drink it. It's like a bit more on the heavy side, but not like a full blown Trappist beer where you basically drink one and you're drunk. So yeah, Omer is my favorite, but I also love a lot of like even American craft brewery stuff, and like I'm also branding fan, so a lot of cool brands, beer brands out there as well. But Omer is probably more traditional one that I really love.
Nice. I'll have to try that one out. I mean, here I used to have like a tap in my fridge. Basically, when I come back from playing 3x3 and then in the night I tap in because like my friends are all like brewing. Seems like this
Wow.
is happening in Novi Sad. One of them is the president of the organization gathering brewers in Serbia. And he always calls every couple of days, do you still have something? I made this. And there is one flavor which is really great, and it's IPA but made out of quince. You can do it only in the season when you have quince, but you know it's amazing, and it was kind of like his first beer, a breakthrough beer. So now
Mm,
everybody knows him. You made that Queen's IPA, like from that. But
cool. That's really cool.
it's really nice, and it's nice flavor.
Send me one.
I will. I'll see. We were just talking with him. It's the Queen season. Why don't we have the IPA ready?
Yeah, but
So,
maybe you need a podcast spin-off where it's like drunky marketing and then people are drinking beers and talking about this.
actually, we had an episode talking about YouTube SEO, and actually, one of the things that we mentioned is how hip hop artists are actually doing it, or the skateboarders, or
Mm,
and it's like hip hop artists just gather, I don't know, the Game or Kanye or whoever it is, sit down around a huge table when they have a lot of different alcohol drinks, and basically they drink and they tell stories. So it's saying, that's nice. As long as you can have a great audio, that's perfect. And one of the
uh,
examples was like, because obviously podcasts are becoming, like you and I sit down here in front of the camera and talk. It's boring in a setup way, right?
yeah.
So to become more entertaining and interesting, and this is where YouTube is going in a way, building up to that educational part that's already up there. Basically, you need to do something differently. You can, and the example was, we can sit down in a limo when naked chicks are pouring us champagne, and we can end up talking about business, and maybe at the end even trying some mushrooms.
Okay, wow. That's a special format.
Yeah, a unique one. If you survive, you're good.
Let me know when that's ready. The beer one, I mean.
Yeah, perfect, man. Thanks again for spending here time with me talking about B2B branding, and I hope we'll do it again. I'll follow what you are doing with Alan and cheer you along the way. If you think that me or Funky Marketing audience can help you out in a way, just feel free to reach out anytime.
Amazing. Thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
Hey, you too, guys. Keep it funky, as we always say at the end.
Cheers.